Most of these apps are pretty much the same, they just have the same features with different names, which users love. We love the names being different. So what I want to do in this video is compare Capacities with my current note-taking app of choice, Obsidian, and look at the feature differences, if there are any, the name differences, because there will be some, and whether I would be able to move or change some of my system in Obsidian to Capacities or take inspiration from Capacities. So let's get into it. The first thing you'll notice is I'm on my browser. I'm on Microsoft Edge because this is a browser-based tool. You can't use it offline or locally stored on your computer, which is immediately in conflict with Obsidian, which is what I use. But aside from that, it's pretty much the same. When you scroll down, the page here looks like a normal file inside of Obsidian. On the left side, we have the left sidebar, and then on the right side, we don't have a right sidebar as such, but we have the dot menu that you would expect to see, with share options, import, export, unpin from safe, which is just a favorites button, or a starred button, or a bookmark button. They're all the same thing, but that's this one. You can copy object references, which is essentially just copying a link to a block or anything inside of the page. You can open object settings, and this is where the terminology, very similar with AnyType and Tana, comes into this. The object in this case is the page, but when you click the button it just goes to the main settings menu. You then have duplicate, templates, and delete buttons, so what you would expect, but you can have a sort of right side if you push open menu for current content, which gives you these three things. A table of content, which in my opinion is better than most other tools because they make you have a block in here. This is actually on the side, just like Obsidian with the outline plugin. Objects inside, which is essentially the outgoing links inside of Obsidian. So these are just objects or files, pages linked inside of this page. So at the moment, as we look down, this is all text. However, if I add the two brackets, which is consistent across most of these tools, you can add a new page. So I can click browse. Let's add a page there. Now a studio for your mind is linked and the object inside is now there. So it's just outgoing links. We then have text stats. However, if I highlight the word, it doesn't highlight just the words that have been highlighted. So this is like the core word count plugin inside of Obsidian, not the better word count plugin, which community has built. So although the stats are here, it's limited. And then we have created and last updated information down the bottom, which again is consistent with most of these applications. While we're down here, I'll quickly show you that when you hover over something, it says click to visit. So that's going to the page. Control click to open in a new tab. Shift click to open in the side panel. So when I hold shift and then click, this is where we get the side panel view. Now I haven't found a way to be able to move this really anywhere. Like I can't move it down the bottom. I can move it into the page, but I can't move it to the left side or anything like that. It's just stuck there, very similar to a Notion or any type sort of pop-out window or Roam pop-out window, not like Obsidian where you can move it around all over the place. And when we go to the top right, we get the three-dot menu for this page, this file. We then get an expand option, which lets you go into the page, which is not what I wanted, but it does give us an option to have a look at the buttons at the top, so control. So you can go backwards or forwards, just backwards and forwards buttons, and there are hotkeys, which is nice, but you can't customize them. So let's go back. And we're back to our overview page, which you may have noticed is pinned because it's saved, and that's why the pin icon is there. If I click it, it's now not filled in and it's now no longer pinned, but I'm going to keep it there so I don't lose it. And just in case you're curious, you can push this button to close down or open up the left sidebar, so it is expandable. However, I'm yet to find a way to make this wide view, so the bullet points go out to the side. There's always this sort of like blank empty space, which is nice, but sometimes I want more. Which brings us to the main overview page file. Capacities has Markdown just like most of the previous applications, so when you push a dash and then space, it turns to a bullet point, one dot and hashes, they all turn into whatever it is that you're using Markdown. So when I push hash and then space, it turns it into a heading 1. And from my testing, there are 4 levels of heading, whereas in Obsidian there's 6, and I use all 6, so this would be limiting for me. And very similar to Obsidian, AnyType, Tana, Notion, there are slash commands. So when you're inside typing, you can push the slash, and it comes up with all the options. And I'm going to quickly scroll through these, but there's nothing in here that you wouldn't expect to see. You've got all your headings, you've got your list items, you've got your code blocks, your toggle blocks, your today's, tomorrow links, and then there's AI, which I'll speak about in a bit. But just like with Notion, if I'm writing something and then push slash, it comes up with this option and I can't turn this off. In Obsidian, I turn this off because it's annoying when I'm writing slash inside of something, so that's just a personal pet peeve that I have. Which, for those of you that watch the Notion video, I also have a personal pet peeve with blocks and columns, because even though columns are nice in this overview sort of view, when I'm writing and doing research, I don't like blocks and columns because they irritate me. For example, if I wanted to write something down here, you can see I'm clicking, nothing's happening. So I have to come into here, make a new block, drag it down, and then make it its own column thing. It just frustrates me with the writing. But that's a personal preference. Some people may love blocks, I personally don't, and columns the same. I gave you an example of backlinks earlier, but with the backlinks inside of Capacities, if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see this is linked to a daily note. When I open up this backlink, it opens up the entire file, and when I come in, I can actually click and edit the file from the backlinks pane, which you can't do in Obsidian, so this is a very nice feature. However, I'm not quite sure how I would use this, because at the moment I would need to scroll up, see the text, scroll down, write whatever it is, whereas in Obsidian, in the backlinks, I would open it up as a side panel or a new tab and then use them at the same time, or a new window, and see them at the same time. Here I would have to scroll up and down, and if I've got lots of backlinks, I'd have to scroll really far down, which to me is a friction point in writing. So even though this is a nice feature, I'm not sure what the use case is for me right now. Highlights, they're just far easier inside of basically any other note-taking tool when compared to Obsidian, but again, with all the other tools, you're limited to the color palette that they give you. So if you want flexibility with colors, Obsidian's better if you understand HTML and CSS. If you don't, then highlights here are far easier. For those of you that do the calendar daily note thing, they have a calendar, so you can see if I push this button, it takes me to today, and this is where we get into all of these different views that Capacity offers. On the right-hand side, we have the calendar, which is a plugin in Obsidian, so that's not unique. But we then have a month view, a week view, 3 days view, and a day view, which is where this note-taking tool tries to bridge the gap between calendar, time management app, and note-taking app. I am not a daily notes person. I don't write notes in each day and then link them out. I write the notes in source notes and then relate them to the research that I'm looking at, rather than having a date specific to it. And for me, when I'm managing my tasks and projects, if I want a month view, I'm going to go to my calendar, same as the week view, 3-day view, because my calendar, Morgan, which, Alt-C, there it is, I can see that straight away, and I don't need to worry about any of these sorts of things. And Morgan also has a global hotkey. As you can see, I can open it up whenever I want, rather than having to go into the calendar or anything like that. And Morgan's got scheduling and other calendar app things, whereas this doesn't. This is just showing notes for days, which is nice, but again, I'm not sure what the use case would be for me. With AI, I can't say much because I don't like AI for writing, because as I mentioned in the Notion video, a lot of the time it either oversimplifies or brings in information that's incorrect with the research I'm looking at, because AI is looking at what the general population say, and that's not where my research is, unfortunately, so I can't really use AI to do much. So apart from saying Capacities has access to AI, that's about all I can say. I've gone over this inside of the sidebar. Oh, done that again. One of those small user things where you highlight and then it thinks you have highlighting blocks. Anyway, tags, yeah, they work literally the same as tags in every other app. You can add a hashtag and then you add a tag to whatever file or object it is, or page it is, and you just tag in stuff. I am not personally a fan of the graph view, but they have a graph view. You can see the icon up here, and when you push it, you can see all of the linked stuff. And I don't use this, but from what I've seen, the filters and sorts and flexibility of grouping inside of Obsidian is better than this. So if you do use the graph, I would say Obsidian's better, but I don't use the graph, so I can't comment too much about that. Split screen I've covered. Obsidian is far more flexible. Multi-window, because this is on the browser, you'd need to have another browser window open, which isn't as intuitive or easy to use as Obsidian. And using this as an example, if I control click, I have a tab, I can just drag this out onto another screen, and you can see it's now another pop-up window, so I can, I'm just shaking it, load everything, but you can now see that, there we go, it's 2 pop-up windows. Then Obsidian Canvas, it has a canvas where you can put cards and files and link things together like mind mapping, and Capacities just doesn't have that from what I can see. Even though there are shortcuts, and quite a few of them, they're not custom and there's not as many, so again, Obsidian has the customization and extensibility over Capacities. Because Capacities is cloud-based, the speed is good, don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's not offline and it's not local, so Obsidian is faster, and Obsidian does work offline, which Capacities, from my experience, doesn't. Which ties in directly with the backup. They back up your Capacities in a zip file with markdown files. So even though this is online, it's basically markdown files that they show online, and you can back it up locally. Well, Obsidian is already backed up locally. It's already there. So this is because it's cloud-based, and I think this is, again, one of those considerations with Obsidian versus most of the other note-taking tools. Obsidian is local first, so you have full control, whereas this you don't, which requires a backup of some sort. Moving to the aesthetic, this again is because it's a cloud-based app, it looks pretty much the same as Notion, AnyType, Tana. They all look very, very similar. They have the same sort of aesthetic, whereas Obsidian has its own aesthetic, but you can change it to anything you want. You can have pink, purple, yellow, green, blue, whatever, move them big, small, it doesn't matter. So yes, this looks clean, it looks nice, but Obsidian again has that customization and extensibility that I personally like. And I've put no folders in here because there aren't folders in Capacities, but you can see over the side, these are all of the objects. And objects are kind of like databases or collections together, which can act sort of like folders. But before we go there, I want to quickly cover the lexicon from my understanding right now anyway, because inside of Capacities there are spaces. So right at the top, I'm in Notes. And then I can go to making another space. So I've got a home space and a note space. And to me, this is like a workspace in Notion or a vault inside of Obsidian. So you can have multiple spaces. Then there are pages, and a page is like a file in Obsidian, but it's an object. So this is a page, and similar with AnyType, this is a page type of object. So you can see I can change this page object to a test object because this is a test object that I created. And those objects are shown inside of what looks like database views, which are over here. So if I click on Daily Notes, these are daily note objects inside of the daily notes collection database, which is where you get your list, wall, gallery, table views. So you can see the collection is a filtered database. So these are collections of objects, this being the test object. And if I was to change this from test to page, you can see it's now going to merge the properties. So this is like going in Notion from one database to another database, merging properties. In AnyType, it's going from one type to another type, merging properties. And inside of Obsidian, it's going from one potentially class to another class using metadata menu as a plugin, merging properties, but you don't need to do any of that in Obsidian because they're just file properties, so you don't need to merge them. You can choose to or not. So I'm just going to change the type, and you can see now the highlights page object no longer shows in the testing collection because it's a different object. So the types of object in AnyTypes were classes, and the types of object inside of Capacities is the same sort of thing. Hopefully that makes sense. I wish these apps used the same names, but they don't. So moving down to databases, we have property information. Going into the testing collection and the test object types, at the moment there are no properties, so I push add property and it gives me all of the different property types, which you'll be very familiar with. You have text, you have blocks, so multiple paragraphs. This is a unique property inside of Capacities, but to me this is just text. Single select, multi-select, text box, date type, number, all the things you would expect to see inside of properties, with the limitation that there aren't formulas, there aren't roll-ups, there aren't relations. You'd need to sort of hack your way around it. Look at that, I just figured out how to have a wide layout. So what I said earlier, I was just not finding the right button. Okay, there you go. But just because this test object type is inside of this collection, you can add it to another collection. So I can create a collection with title, at the moment nothing. So I now have a new collection, or a new filtered database, or sub-database if you were. And looking back into the sidebar, we now have new collection. And when I come in here, you can see this untitled, so let's title this Beginner's Look. The Beginner's Look is now in the test collection because it's part of the test object type, but it's also in a new collection. And here is that new collection. If I go all the way to the side, I can add a description, I can search through the collection, I can add content, but coming back, I can then change this to Beginners. And now when I click out, you can see the Beginner's Look test object file is inside of the Beginners collection. But it's also inside of the testing collection because that's the main, that's the top one, and then this is like a sub database or a filtered database. And when we click into that page, object, type, we then have the collections all at the top. So collections like adding it to a database view, which inside of Obsidian would just be adding properties or changing a data view query for whatever information you want. I'm currently in the gallery view. I can go to the table view. You can see I can add a property in a table, as you would expect to see. If I click on the content, I can then change the property information here. And if I do go on open property settings, this takes us back to those settings that I went to earlier from the right sidebar. And here you can see we've got space settings and content type settings. And this is where you start going down the breadcrumbs. We have the basic content type. So in any type, there were core types given, and then you can add types. This is the same thing. You have daily note and page as default types, default basic content types, and then custom types you can add. And again, in Obsidian, your default types is just a file. If you want to add a class, use metadata menu, and then you can add as many as you want. Add subclasses, which is what we have inside of Capacities in those collections. And by clicking in this type, you can then change the type information, so the class information inside of here. But as you see, as we come down, there is limitations. This option requires you to become a believer, and when you push the button you get to the subscription and billing, and I don't personally explore this because I don't pay for many of my apps. I pay for syncing in Obsidian, but that's it, and I don't have to pay for syncing, I can choose to, so I'm not limited in Obsidian with the features apart from just personal preference. So coming back to the collections view, I'm going to click on overview to go here. We've done the collections, we've done the properties. With the templates, it's the same limitation as the database templates really. Because when you come to the content type settings, you can see we've got a template. And the template, to my knowledge, is specific to the type. Whereas in Obsidian, everything can have any template you want. So you're not specified to, okay, this class has this template. You can have any template with any class. You could even have multiple templates in the same class because templates in Obsidian are just text added to files rather than information added to a class. Sorry, object type. And when we come into the template, you can see it templates prefill an object. So it's specific to a type or a class or a database. It's not as flexible or as extensible as Obsidian, a theme you'll see throughout this. Then to some other notable considerations when I was looking at these apps, there is integration between email, Telegram, WhatsApp with Capacities. So you can bring something from email, from Telegram, from WhatsApp into Capacities via an integration. You can probably do it in Obsidian with a community plugin, but this has it built in rather than you having to sort of faff around. I personally don't do this, so this isn't a use case for me, but maybe it's useful for you watching. For action management, I don't know how I would do that inside of Capacities because I have various views. Like this inside of my Obsidian Home Canvas dashboard, I have essentially database filters and views inside of these cards which I can customize, change, do whatever, and others here. And this is all in one view. I can zoom in and zoom out. In Capacities, I'm not sure how I could see all of those projects at the same time and research things at the same time because they're all in different collections and I would need a collection of collections in a view somewhere that I don't have to scroll up and down tons, which I don't know how I would do that. And when it comes to granular task management, I do that in Morgan anyway because that's my calendar and tasks app. So Capacities wouldn't be able to fulfill that for me because there's limited time blocking, scheduling features inside of this because it's not a time app, it's a notes app, which is understandable. A couple of other significant considerations for me is there is no Zotero integration at the moment with Capacities, and as someone that uses Zotero for academic research and other research with blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts, etc., not having this and being able to go backwards and forwards between Zotero and my note-taking app, I wouldn't be able to work, so I can't move to Capacities for research, which is most of my day. And even though there are spaces inside of Capacities with pinned or favorite page, files, objects, I don't have workspaces. So in Obsidian, I can push my home button and I'm in my home workspace and it's going to load everything up slowly because I'm recording. Then if I go to food, I then have a different workspace. So this is all the food stuff. If I click on temp, this is a different workspace. So the sidebars change, the files change. These are sort of temporary places where I can go in. Even the buttons change. You can see now I've got a daily note there. Click on home, that button goes away because it's a different workspace. Whereas in Capacities, I would need to come up here and then find the space, then go into whatever page or file or collection or whatever I need, which is like 2, 3, potentially 5, 6 plus clicks away, where at Obsidian it's 1. Obviously I'm biased and there are things about Capacities that I don't understand, but that was my beginner's look. If you have any thoughts or comments, leave them in the comment section below.